Hey yo, what's going on? It's your boy Man in the Wild. Just kind of in my outer space science kick right now. Um, trying to make this shit make sense. And this is actually the first experiment I've seen with a spinning globe. As far as the scientific experiments and everything, try to recreate, the alleged facts of life that we got going on this earth. Regarding the shape, regarding the fact that motherfuckers saying water can bend if you stretch it across the long enough of a point. Like, man, the shit they say about a ball earth is just, it's astounding. And it's amazing that motherfuckers really believe it. So, we're gonna let him go, because he goes for a little bit, but I don't know if I'm gonna let him make it all the way through. But, shit, we're gonna go where he goes, man.
Okay, today I'm going to be placing a levitating globe in the vacuum chamber and seeing if it can spin forever. You can see that there's nothing.
All right, so first off, you sitting there talking about you gonna put it in a vacuum chamber to see if it's gonna spin forever. Motherfucker, you don't have any type of, what do you want to call it? Any type of variables that you can add into your equation that can say, yeah, it's gonna spin forever. You don't have that much time. You understand? You just don't. Because even if the speed stays constant for whatever amount of time that you got going on, which in your mind, forever is a long time. You understand? And you're going to start it off by giving us a fucking magnet ball, a levitating magnet ball? Okay.
Around it. Completely levitated. So what we're going to be testing is if I can spin this really fast, will it really spin forever in the vacuum chamber, or is there something else that will slow it down? So I have here a green magnet and an orange.
All right, because I don't know which video this is gonna be, because I mean this is actually the first one I'm doing on Buddy in his vacuum chamber, because I find the vacuum chamber extremely interesting. You understand? I find the vacuum chamber extremely interesting because considering we're surrounded by a vacuum, allegedly, there's no way Earth should technically exist. If you see what happens when a vacuum sucks on, you vacuum the floor, vacuum your car, whatnot, and all of that type of shit. So the power of a vacuum. And if a sock gets in its way, guess where the sock is going? It's going inside the fucking vacuum. Your little pennies and change and shit. Anything that's on the floor, now it may clog the shit up. You understand? But in the end, if space is a vacuum, there's no way for it to anything to exist around it.
So the reason that I can't stably levitate these on top of each other is not just because I'm bad at stacking them, but it's actually due to something that's been proved called Earnshaw's theorem. Basically, Earnshaw's theorem proves that when you try to levitate two magnets on top of each other, they will always be inherently unstable in at least one axis. So they will always flip. Unless I restrain one axis, then it can levitate. So then how is this globe levitating? Well, it's levitating using maglev technology. And what it does is it uses permanent magnets in the base and in the globe, but it also has a feedback system. So it has electromagnets in it in addition to the permanent magnets. And what those electromagnets do is they have a feedback system that senses when it starts to get off balance and it pushes it back in balance. So this doesn't deviate from Earnshaw's theorem because it's not a static system, meaning that there's continual...
All right, so what he's doing is he's trying to throw somebody's theorem, somebody's, ideas in there to explain away how the globe is levitating on this pad. But what's really not being understood by this shit, and it can't be understood because motherfuckers ain't cutting his voice the fuck off, why the fuck is this even relevant? We're supposed to be talking about the real live Earth, right, spinning inside of a vacuum. That's what we're supposed to be talking about now. But now you're sitting here trying to recreate a spinning Earth from a magnet pad. So is that what we're upon? Like, I don't see that shit and shits in the NASA photos and CGIs and none of that. a little pad underneath of us and shit keeping us afloat. Fuck out of here.
Feedback from the electromagnets inside of here. So that's how it can keep levitating. So this is a really cool piece of technology here. I'll put a link in my description where you can get it on Amazon if you want. And it's actually made to stably rotate a little bit because it's the Earth, so they wanted to show you that the Earth is rotating. So we're not going to time it until it stops, but we're going to time it until it gets down to this many revolutions per minute. Okay, so first, before we put it in the vacuum chamber, let's see how long it takes to start spinning at 1.5 revolutions per second and then get down to a 0.5 revolution per second. So I'm just gonna blow some air on it to start spinning, and let's see how long it takes to get to a 0.5 revolution per second. Okay, it's going about 1.5 revolutions per second now. Let's start the timer and see how long it takes to get to a 0.5 revolution per second. Okay, so it's going about 0.5 revolution per second now. It looks like it took around 6 minutes. So now let's see how long it takes in the vacuum chamber. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Got a pretty good vacuum in there now. Let's see how long it can spin like this.
See, now, if you was really trying to show me, you understand, that we on a ball Earth spinning around, you know, water bending and all of that shit, you would take that pad out of there and let the shit float inside the vacuum. Because that's what the fuck we supposed to be doing, right? As a ball. But nah, you're not going to get anything accurate when it comes to any type of experiments pertaining to the ball Earth. It's impossible. All they do is throw out a bunch of big numbers, you know, allegedly important people's names. You know, we see how the character game is played these days, so what the fuck makes you think it's any different when it comes to these scientists and anything like that? Because, I mean, hell, you see they put legal analysts and shit in front of us and all these doctors in front of us now, right? Man, all of these names with all these different theories and theorems and all that shit, these motherfuckers ain't no different when they're trying to conform you to a fucking ball Earth, man.
Okay, now we're at around a 0.5 revolution per second. So it's still slowed down even in the vacuum chamber. Okay, so it looks like there wasn't a big difference between in the atmosphere and in a vacuum on how long this was able to spin. So that means that the main resistance was not coming from the air, but due to something else. So as I said before, the globe works by using electromagnets that are keeping it balanced. So those electromagnets are continually in a feedback loop, and that feedback loop essentially is creating a little bit of magnetic resistance. And so it's stealing some of the angular momentum of the globe as it spins, as it tries to keep it balanced.
So is he trying to say that we have a magnet underneath of us keeping us afloat? Understand? Because he's sitting there talking about the causes and how this is working and how that's working. So is that how you're trying to explain to me that we're sitting on a floating water ball inside of a vacuum? Because, I mean, we have to be inside of a vacuum if the space is a vacuum and it surrounds us. Like, yo, that shit, it don't make fucking sense. And as it always comes to it, man, stop making dumb shit make sense.
So one thing that was different from our floating Earth here in the vacuum chamber and the real Earth in the vacuum is that this doesn't have air around it. But the question then arises, how come the vacuum of space doesn't suck the air off of the Earth? And it's a valid question. If you think about it, there's an atmosphere around the Earth, and then there's a complete vacuum outside of it. So why doesn't all of the air just rush off the Earth into the vacuum? And the answer to that is actually pretty simple. It's due to the gravity of the Earth that holds the air on.
Yo, get the fuck out of my face. That's insane to me. That's the answer to everything that gets, like any type of question that gets asked when it comes to how does the Earth do this, how does water do that, how does this happen, how does that happen. It's always comes back to gravity. You know, the gravitational pull and all of that shit. right? The gravitational pull in and of itself is some bullshit, right? It is some complete bullshit. Because if there was such a gravitational pull, a weak ass fly wouldn't be able to just go around and be free to be itself. It would be pulled to the fucking earth. Period. Birds wouldn't be able to fly. They would be pulled to the earth. Just like the water bending and being pulled to the earth around a ball. Ain't no way that anything could not be, detach itself for any type of time. This shit don't make sense.
And it's easiest to understand this if you think of air as little tiny particles. And so all of these little molecules of oxygen and nitrogen in the air, they're all bumping around, hitting each other. This is my molecule of oxygen, we'll say. And eventually, they can migrate up to the top of the atmosphere. So let's say it gets all the way up to the top of the atmosphere, and it gets bumped by another oxygen molecule, and it flies up. But in order for that molecule to leave the Earth, it has to be going faster than the escape velocity of Earth. So the escape velocity happens because as you get further and further away from the Earth, the gravitational pull on the ball gets weaker and weaker and weaker, so that it will always have enough speed so that it will never return back to Earth. And that's called the escape velocity. So if you could throw a ball at the escape velocity, it would leave the Earth never to come back again. So the reason why you've never seen somebody throw a ball off the Earth is because the escape velocity of Earth is 11 kilometers per second. So around 33 times the speed of sound. So the
all right, so you mean to tell me that rockets that shoot up into the sky, right, to go about their business in space, are at the speed 33 times the speed of sound? Okay, so how the fuck you get back in then? Can you generate that much speed to get back the fuck in? Or is it easier to get back in because the vacuum's actually on the outside, so it's easier to leave the vacuum than it is to go into the vacuum?
regular molecules that are in our atmosphere, like nitrogen, oxygen, argon, they don't have enough velocity to escape the gravity of the Earth. But hydrogen, for example, does have a high enough speed to escape the Earth. So whenever you release hydrogen gas into the atmosphere, eventually it will migrate out to the edges of the atmosphere.
And then it's funny to me too is, okay, so if you got this atmosphere up here, right? How the fuck ain't it just thrown to the top of the atmosphere though? Like, that's where the shit don't make sense. How is it just sucked all the way down? That's why I said the gravitational pull has to be something extremely, like, it has to be such a powerful force that it won't allow water to rise up like that, except for in vapors. You know, be created by the heat and all of that shit. That's why the shit is dumb. That's why the explanation they're giving is fucking dumb. You know, because you sitting there talking about we're spinning, you know, and then upon the spinning, you know, shit moves and goes outward, you know, but the gravitational pull is pulling it back inward, but yet and still we got a vacuum on the outside of outer space pulling it outward. Like, yo.
And it'll get bumped and it'll just fly off into space. So all the hydrogen leaves the Earth. And for that matter, actually all the helium also leaves the Earth. When you fill a balloon with helium, eventually all that helium will leave Earth. So if the Earth were much smaller than it is, then it wouldn't be able to keep the atmosphere on it because the escape velocity would be much slower. And that's why the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, because it's much smaller. It has only 1/6 the gravity of the Earth. And so the escape velocity is much slower than the speed of the oxygen or the nitrogen atoms, so they can easily escape from the moon. So space is almost a perfect vacuum. And the Earth is going to be spinning for a very, very long time. But eventually it will slow down. So when the moon rotates around the Earth, it pulls on the Earth a little bit unevenly, and that's what causes the tides on the Earth to form. And because of those tidal forces, it slows down the Earth's rotation just a little bit, and
like, yo, I'm low-key done pausing, but I really want this explanation to be heard on like how they're trying to, like, they're really trying to give you this shit as something real, man. Like, this is not some lone wolf giving you information type shit on some, you know, aside from NASA. Like, nah, this shit is like what they talk about. This is what they believe in regards to the ball Earth being real, and that's what we live on. Motherfuckers really traveling to space. Whole shit is a fucking fraud, man. And they've gotten so much money delegated, like relegated to so many different people. That shit is crazy. Lying to you.
Moon gets a little bit further away from the Earth. So as the moon moves away and the Earth slowly slows down its spin, after a few 100 billion years, the length of the day of the Earth will be around 47 current days. And then the moon and the Earth will become...
All right, I'm done. They start throwing out the most randomest of numbers, the most insane of numbers, and it's like you gonna believe these motherfuckers because they're the ones who have the learned knowledge, you know, the school knowledge. Stop believing these motherfuckers, man, because they don't have anything good for you. If they're willing to tell you this bullshit, right, get you to believe in this dumb shit. You know, just know they don't give a fuck about you, man. This, I don't know, ball Earth experiment with these levitating magnets and all this shit, man, this bullshit is confirmed.